In less than 48 hours, Namibians will be heading to the polls to elect a new president and members of the National Assembly. 27 November 2024 is the date set for the elections. Now, at the start of the year, 18 African countries took to the polls. 2024 can be declared as the global year of elections, where over 70 independent United Nations member states took part in nationwide elections, referenda, and other forms of public voting. Greetings, Namibia, and a warm welcome to this very special edition of Election Talk. I'm your host, Denver Kisting, alongside Madam Joyce Rukoro, our sign language interpreter for this episode. Now, this evening we discuss the road to the 27th of November 2024, when a new president will be elected. We've invited an esteemed panel. We have invited Mr. Peter Sharma, the Chief Electoral and Referenda Officer of the Electoral Commission of Namibia, who will join us later this evening. Joining us now is Madam Neta Ishono, Executive Director at the Namibia Institute for Democracy. Later during the show, we'll be talking to several returning officers across the country about the readiness of this year's election. Madam Ishono, good evening and welcome to Election Talk.
Mr. Kisting, good to be back in the studio with you.
You have paid us quite a few visits during the course of the past year for various purposes, bringing us up to speed with the work of the NID. From where you stand at this moment, what do you make of where we are as a country? Moreover, what do you make of how ready we are as a country to conduct these very important democratic processes?
Oh, we are ready. Electoral calendar was introduced early in the year. Most of the dates were kept. We already had special elections. Campaigning is at its peak. Out of 1.9 million eligible voters, 1.7 are registered.
Or 1.4, more or less.
1.4. Anyway, we are above 80% are registered. Now it's a matter of taking your vote or your democratic duty serious and making that step this year to go and vote on the 27th and next year to go and vote in the local authority elections. Because it's very important, Denver, that we realize it's not just election year this year, next year as well. Because we see too many times that the citizens or the eligible voters are ready for the presidential and national assembly elections. And come next year's election, it's like people have forgotten.
I want us to take one step back, please. According to you, we are ready as a country to host these elections on Wednesday, the 27th day of November 2024. And you've mentioned a couple of variables that are in place to demonstrate how ready we are. What do you attribute this readiness to? Are the institutions that are responsible for these processes, primarily the constitutional body called the Electoral Commission of Namibia, are they to get the credit for the progress that we've made? And how much credit should be taken by civil society and Namibians at large? Because 1.4 million Namibians, as you pointed out earlier, did queue up to get registered to participate in Wednesday's process.
It's a group effort, as always, Denver. Of course, the electoral management body is tasked constitutionally and legally to arrange elections. That's their core mandate. Because citizens might wonder, when we have elections every 5 years, what are you doing with the rest of the time? So the electoral management body is responsible for the whole electoral cycle. And yes, it's a group effort. It's the electoral management body that does what they are mandated to do by an act of parliament. Civil society is doing what we are supposed to do, but it's also citizens. We played as much a role as citizens as the electoral management body and other watchdog organizations, like the media played their role to inform citizens. They are part of civil society. NID and other NGOs, they played their role to do voter education. Political parties played their role to campaign, to get registered, to set up their electoral colleges. Citizens played their role and got registered, because what is an election and you only have electoral management body but no registered parties, no registered voters?
Now, despite the efforts on the part of all stakeholders, we have witnessed in the past a dwindling participation in the actual voting process. So it's one thing to get registered to participate in the process, it's something else to turn up on D-Day and participate at the polls. So what do you make of the fact that we have been informing, we have been educating, we have been sensitizing the electorate, yet we see an increased voter apathy and dwindling numbers of Namibians showing up at the polls when it's time to actually cast that vote?
You know, citizens are entitled to withhold their votes. Namibia is not one of there are countries in this world where everybody is mandated to vote. In our Constituent Assembly, we decided not to do it. I wish we would have actually done it, that everybody is tasked to vote so that it's on everybody's responsibility to vote.
Would it still be a constitutional democracy if one were
Those other
to
countries like Australia
legislatively compel citizens to participate in this process?
Absolutely. Other countries where it's mandatory, they are democracies as well, and much older than Namibia. So we have the examples out there. It would still be a democracy. And it would be a democracy where responsibility is put up on every eligible voter. It wouldn't actually be a bad idea, so that you deal with it. In this case, now that it's not mandatory, you can choose not to deal with it at all. And what does that make you? Less responsible or not? Or are you just withholding for several other reasons where there can be so
Irrespective
many?
of what the reasons are of those who choose not to participate in an election, what is the impact of withholding one's vote on the democracy, on government, from your perspective?
From my perspective, it's a pity that that responsibility can't be taken by every citizen, because when I withhold now my vote and you went to vote, so you're deciding who's next in line. I haven't. If I'm not happy with what is there, how much could you say, but you could have gone vote? But I understand there are citizens who are withholding their votes for a particular reason.
At the same time,
At
there is
the
a
same
school
time,
of thought who
it's
is
a
of the
protest
view
vote.
that is also a vote, certainly.
It's a protest vote. But in the end, in Namibia, the people that set up the government are the people that did go and vote. As much as a protest vote seems like the right thing to do for some people,
It doesn't stop
It doesn't
someone from
stop
being elected
anybody.
into power.
Exactly.
It doesn't stop people from occupying seats in the National Assembly
Exactly.
as voted into power by those who did participate in the process.
Exactly.
Let us take another step back, please. So as we shared with our viewers in the introduction, reminding them of more than half of the world population went to the polls this year. And we have witnessed a number of developments across the globe. What is your take on what is happening in the global political space? And no man is an island, so no Namibia is an island. What happens elsewhere certainly has a bearing on us for various reasons, primarily being the fact that we're a small open economy. So a lot has been happening elsewhere. So what is your take on that in isolation, but also on the impact thereof on our constitutional democracy?
Denver, you know what my take is on that? That Namibia can teach the world about democracy. That we could go out there, and I think it's time that we give assistance to particular countries and assist them with their democracy and assist them with voter education. Because we're a young democracy, 34 years, but we've been dealing with it for the past 34 years. Other countries that have been dealing with it for 120 and longer, we see in Europe, we see in North America, we see in Asia, there are challenges on democracies. And because you've been at it for so long, I think they neglected civic education. They assumed we're a standing democracy, we tick all the boxes, we're good. But you're not good. Democracy is a muscle. The minute you don't exercise it, the minute you don't work on it, you get what we get right now. I mean, when we look at geopolitics generally, some of it you can attest to dwindling civic education. The same with, remember in health, in some countries, they're not educating people anymore on HIV, AIDS, or other sexual transmitted diseases. The moment you stop with civic education, you have a problem, because it's a continuous effort. You need to be at it continuously. You cannot think 80 years I've been a democracy, or 125 years, that's it. I can just assume all my citizens are Democrats. Because we are shocked how some so-called leaders in democracy are regressing in democracy.
What responsibility do we have being part of the globe? And you did share with us earlier that you believe that Namibia can teach the world a few lessons
Absolutely.
in democracy. But what responsibility do you believe we have as a globe, both individually and collectively, to see to it that democracy gets strengthened, particularly through the avenue called civic education that you're touching on?
Yeah, we need to really educate ourselves and understand how systems work, the role we play as citizens, the powers that we have. We need to understand legal matters, our constitution, the supreme law. And we need to understand, as you said, we are not an island. We are part of the SADC community. So with that comes an additional set of laws. We are part of the African Union. With that comes an additional set of law. We are a member to the United Nations, additional set of law. We need to understand what have we ratified, what have we assigned to, what is Vision 2030, what is Agenda 2030, what is the Africa we want in 2063, what is the SADC we want in 20...
But whose responsibility is
Citizens, each one of us.
That's exactly what I'm pointing at.
Yes.
Is it only the responsibility of an electoral body in the instance of elections, of civic organizations in the instance of
Absolutely
broader civic matters? What responsibility vests in the individual, in the citizen, to familiarize him or herself with the supreme law of the land and the fundamentals of the supreme law of the land as they pertain to him or herself?
Denver, when you wake up in the morning, we all wake up, we're thankful, another day. We get to see the sun again another day. And when you get yourself ready, what is it that you want to do with the day? Do you want to let time pass by idle, or do you want to say, I'm going to make this day count. I'm going to make the next 24 hours count. And for us as an institution that gives civic education, our day counts when we are able to educate people on the structures and everything. If I don't know, let's just talk about eligible voters. So from the age of 18, as a citizen...
By the time that registration ended, you should have turned 18.
Let's say, yes, when you're 18 years old, you have a responsibility to understand the system in which you're living in, the economic setup, the political setup, the social setup. We have a social contract with each other. You and I as citizens, I cannot just jump up and hurt you now. You can't do the same to me. And the same with the state. The state, we pay taxes. The state says, I'm ensuring you get services. We need to understand that. It's very, very crucial that you understand that. And get your information from reputable sources. Read your constitution. Read your understand how your constituency work, how your locality.
Is it your conviction based on your visits to various parts of this country? And I know you went on a number of drives this year to bring the Constitution closer to the people, to help the people understand the significance of this year's electoral process, and to help them deepen their understanding of civic matters in general. But is it your conviction that the average Namibian who's eligible to participate does enough? I'm talking on the responsibility that also vests in them to familiarize themselves with the Constitution and with their rights and responsibilities.
Unfortunately not. The Constitution is available as an app for those that want it on their phone or on their computer. The Constitution is available in as a hard copy. But I don't know when last MICT, Ministry of Information Communication Technology, printed new constitutions. Because from what I've observed the last few years, it was mostly civil society reprinting constitutions or the Office of the Ombudsman. It should be mandatory for every Namibian to have a constitution. Every school library, for every learner, for every student, for everybody in this country, there should be a constitution in a way that you can read it in Braille, in your local vernacular, in English, as an app, and as whatever. But I understand the Constitution is not in everybody's mind, but that's the law that guides us in this country. I mean, we are not a monarchy, we are not a religious state, we're a secular state. So that means whatever else is holy to you, your ancestry, your Quran, your Bible, or whatever else, the Constitution reigns supreme for our political setup. That's why it's important that we take the Constitution as serious as any other a book or scriptures that's holy to us.
You're addressing the heart of the matter. It's one thing to educate Namibians on the importance and significance of the supreme law of the land being the Constitution. It's one thing to tell them that every single Namibian should own a copy of the Constitution because it reigns supreme. But you certainly can't force Namibians to accept that responsibility and to internalize what this document has in store for them, right? How big of a drawback is that? And how do you measure the success or otherwise of your interventions, of your drives, of your commitment to help change that scenario?
It's a matter, now that we know that not everybody has a constitution, what responsibility are we taking as citizens? Are we having these discussions in our families? Are we having these discussions in our community?
Do you think we are?
We are, but definitely, surely not enough. And the thing is, Denver, Namibia, in the Constituent Assembly, we decided to form our constitution, to put in the laws and acts. And of course, we went and amended some and added. A big issue in Namibia is not just not understanding the constitution, but dealing with the economic disparity. And what we've observed, when I arrive in a certain area and I want to talk about democracy, advocacy, and the constitution, and you can see that people are in an economic disparity, sometimes you have to stop for a minute and you have to ask, what is going on here? I mean, we know what's going on here. We know historically there's still a huge discrepancy and advantage. We still live in 2 or 3 economies in this country. There's the economy above the red line, there's the economy in communal areas, in informal settlements, and then the economy that you see here in town. But there's huge discrepancy in differences. So for Namibians also to buy into the constitution, we also have to discuss the economy.
Let's get into that. If I tell you, Nata, listen, I'm hungry, or I'm unemployed, what constitution stories are you telling me? I'm not interested in that. How do we go about helping Namibians understand the correlation between the supreme law of the land and what it provides for and the accountability that it enforces, right, versus my economic circumstances? Because if that is the reality of many Namibians, as I'm hearing you say, some have flagged exactly that, we need to help Namibians establish a correlation between those circumstances and the supreme law of the land and how the Constitution is meant to serve them.
You know, as much as our Constitution is held, it's a product of different interest groups. And that reflects in the Constitution. When we look at the land issue, it is enshrined in the Constitution that we only distribute land through the willing buyer, willing seller policy. In order to change that, you would have to change that part of the Constitution, which is unchangeable. So that's one issue, but everybody wants a home. Everybody wants means to have an income, to make an income, to have an asset, to have equity. So in Namibia, we need to have the discussion, our democratic discussion needs to go hand in hand with our economic discussion. Does it mean living in a democracy means half the population is not taken care of? No, it can't mean that. So the role of citizens now is holding the very people you vote into power accountable, and I think that's not done enough. We go vote, you vote your particular party or your particular candidate, and you leave it up to that. How many Namibians are following up with their councillors, with their decision maker, with their office bearers?
Madam, it does bring us to this question. Elections, as far as presidential and National Assembly elections are concerned, are held every 5 years. Yet there is a sense, and there is a school of thought that is of the view that it appears it's a brand new phenomena to Namibians every single time, in the manner in which we have to re-educate ourselves about the importance of those processes, in the manner in which we raise questions about the effect and the impact and the necessity of getting involved versus not getting involved every single time. So how is it possible when these democratic processes are scheduled and as frequent as they are, that we seem to be dumbstruck every time they feature?
I don't think we're dumbstruck. I think we're just busy with a lot of other things called life. There is so much happening and so much to worry about, especially economically.
But is that an excuse?
It's not an excuse. It's just what it is. I mean, just like I said before, how come countries that have been democracies for over 8 decades or more than that are battling? So imagine us now. And for us, it's still new, and we can still remember Independence Day, those of us that are over a certain age.
You need not reveal our age like that, but yes.
I don't mind.
Yeah.
But the issue is, it comes back to that. The electoral process, democracy, civic education needs to be a continuous effort. It needs to be part and parcel of our school curriculum, but enshrined, mandatory, markable, not just somewhere in life science, a bit in history, a bit in English, a bit there. It needs to be mandatory. You see now, for those countries that are regressing in democracy, it should have been mandatory that they exercise their democratic right and they understand what the principles are. So for us, it's a continuous effort. Civic education needs to happen continuously. And that's where the group effort comes in. Political parties, what are you doing for the 5 years? The electoral management body, civil society organizations, this needs to be a group effort continuously. And it shouldn't stop when we're like, oh, now was voting day, now we formed coalition, we're done. No, now it's actually which acts are being amended, which laws need to be changed, which policies need to be. Is our electoral tribunal working? Because we always say before elections is after election. Election is a process. It's like a pie. It's like a pizza. It's like a cake. It's before elections, after election. Because when you look at it, now we are in the campaign period. 27 Wednesday is voting day. After voting day is tallying of the votes, and then coalition formation. After that, we need to look at the laws and the act, because new parliamentarians will be inducted and so forth. And they need training, and the citizens need to hold them accountable.
Thank you.
So it is a continuous effort.
Absolutely. And it shouldn't stop once the elections are over.
No.
It should happen throughout during the 5-year period. We did share with you earlier that we will be speaking to some of the returning officers based across the country to hear how ready they are in terms of the respective constituencies. And Madam Getreda Apollos from the Keetmanshoop Rural Constituency now joins us virtually. Good evening, ma'am, and welcome to Election Talk. Madam Apollos, are you there?
Good evening, Denver. Thank you for having me.
Yes, we're very happy to have you this evening. Talk to us about what's unfolding in your constituency. Talk to us about how ready you are.
Denver, in Keetmanshoop, we are ready, we are well prepared. As returning officers, we have started already in September, verifying our venues, polling venues.
We just need you to please speak a bit up, Madam Apollos. We can't hear you very well.
We have started in September in the Karas region, Keetmanshoop,
Yes.
to verify our polling venues in our constituencies. We also create platforms, WhatsApp groups for our stakeholders. We have started with our stakeholder engagement and have also meetings that were well attended by our stakeholders.
Perhaps you can share with us which your key stakeholders are.
Our key stakeholders are the voters, the Namibian police, the entire public, the members from the village councils, the members from the constituency officers. These are our stakeholders.
And they're all on one WhatsApp group.
I can't hear you, Denver.
They are all on one WhatsApp group.
They are all in one WhatsApp groups for the constituencies.
Very well.
Each constituency has created the WhatsApp groups.
You've spoken
so they
about...
Also attend,
yes, ma'am.
They also attended the stakeholder meetings very well. All political parties in our constituencies attended the meetings.
Thank you so much. We're also joined by Madam Helena Kapenda from Oshakati West. Good evening to you, ma'am.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you. Talk to us about the situation in Oshakati West. How ready are you for Wednesday, the 27th day of November, 2024, ma'am?
We are ready. We just concluded our training for the polling officials. It started on the 15th and it ended yesterday. And we are now busy deploying our people to respective stations. So we have already grouped them in group. So tomorrow we are just going to deploy them into their respective constituency.
Anything else that's happening before Wednesday?
What happened today is that we have already contracted the cars. In my constituency, I have 23 cars which has been contracted to transport our material, the sensitive and the non-sensitive, as well as the officials and the police officers to their respective polling officials. And we have also already distributed some of the non-sensitive materials. And hopefully by tomorrow, this time, everybody will be at his or her polling station.
Madam Kapena, let's please draw a distinction between what constitutes sensitive material and what constitutes non-sensitive material for our viewers to understand.
Sensitive materials are those materials which are stored at the police station. These are the ballot papers, those metal seal which contain ballot papers, and also the tablets which we are going to use to verify, to total or maybe to verify the voters. And this material, they are sealed and they are in the custody of the police. Non-sensitive material is those material like maybe tables, chairs, tents, and others.
What challenges have you encountered in Oshakati West thus far?
I think I know every activity has challenges. The only challenges maybe we've encountered for now, it's only when we started the training of the polling officials. There were some people who did not report themselves, and we have to replace them with new officials, and they have to come a bit late. And however, we overcome that because we have trained them, and I think we successfully trained them, and they've also written the assessment test, which they successfully passed. And that's what is happening.
Madam Kapena, please tell us about the number of polling stations in your constituency and how many of those will be mobile stations.
I have in total 19 polling stations, whereby a fixed polling station, and I have 4 mobile teams.
And
all of them will be deployed tomorrow.
And the mobile stations will only operate for certain hours, is that correct?
Yes, they will only operate for certain hours. All of them in my constituency, they start from 7 o'clock in the morning until 1 o'clock, and then they move to another polling station from 2 o'clock to the closing of the poll.
Thank you. Madam Apollos, which challenges have you encountered in your constituency? Madam Apollos, are you there? Madam Apollos? Very well. Madam Mishwana, what do you make of what's happening in Keetmanshoop Rural and Oshakati West in terms of the readiness as shared with us by the returning officers of those constituencies?
They seem to be ready. And they know, I was surprised that she knows how many polling stations are there.
And the number of fixed polling stations and the number of mobile polling stations.
Yes, I was even thinking, oh my God, where is that newspaper inlay and that paper so that I can have a look. But it's very important, especially for a country of Namibia, that the citizens understand where's my nearest polling station and where's that mobile one, so that the elderly and those that cannot access the fixed stations can access the mobile. So from what I hear, they are ready, and it's now just a matter really for the voters to go out there.
Yes, so what we've experienced in the past is, so we know the Act makes provision for polling stations opening at 7 o'clock on polling day until 9 o'clock in the evening. And those who are in the queue at 9 o'clock are to be catered for, right? But we have had challenges in the past with some polling stations, for whatever reason, were not able to start at 7 o'clock on the dot.
Yes.
Is it your observation that we need to then add those additional minutes to the end of the day because we were delayed and voters couldn't cast their vote at that particular moment?
You know, Denver, that gets done anyway. The NID,
in terms of reasonableness, you know.
Yes. NID has been fielding now for the past 3 electoral cycle. We've been fielding observers, and what our observers have observed, for instance, technical reasons. Let's say the battery, when we still had the EVMs, the battery wasn't working, or
there's a power failure.
There's a power failure, or the ink is done. These technical things can happen, or not all the material was there on time at a particular polling station. So our observers have observed that happened. But what they have also observed, that some polling stations were open until 1 o'clock in the morning.
To make up for those challenges?
Not necessarily, because there were so many people. In some cases, you can make up for the challenges, but that wasn't necessarily the reason why most polling stations were open longer. It's just in some areas you have proportionally more people, like in the northern suburbs here in Windhoek. You have many more people staying in the northern suburbs, in Katutura and in all the different constituencies, Umbili, John Pandeni.
The reality, though, of these elections, because it's the presidential and national assembly elections, you need not vote in the constituency where you are ordinarily resident and where you are registered. And we did see with the special elections on the 13th of November that there was an oversubscription. So it could be that more people turn up at a polling station, in fact, in total in a constituency, than budgeted for, and more voting materials may be needed and may have to be transported from elsewhere to make sure that everyone is accommodated, and that could result in delays.
But that's why it's important for the citizens. That's where we play a role as well. There's so much the electoral management body can do, and whoever else is part of that process. But the responsibility of us citizens, how many times have you received now that app of polling stations? How many times were those polling stations in the newspapers now? And that's why, are we having these discussions in our family? Oh, where are you going to vote? Where are you going to vote? Because we have a social contract. We also have a lot of responsibilities as citizens to inform ourselves. If I know, for instance, people ask me, where are you going to vote? I said, I'm going to vote at Centaurus. And if it's full there, I can go to Cederhof. And if it's full there, I can go anywhere else. So I'm already gauging the different polling stations in my area. Every citizen can do that. If you, let's say now you're far in the rural areas, you can go to your councillor, to your village council, to your settlement council, to your constituency council, to your local authority, and you can ask, sorry, I didn't get that pamphlet.
Where's my nearest polling station?
Where's my nearest polling station?
Yeah.
And as you hear...
And if it's a mobile station, which are the hours?
Exactly.
So that I'm ensure that I'm there on time in order to be accommodated. Because a mobile station needs to move elsewhere.
Exactly. And you heard from the from the 2 deployment officers now. They have dispatched the people. The people are out there. We've been talking elections the whole year now. It should have been, every family in Namibia should have heard by now that we have elections. So you could be informing your friends, your family, people around you, if you know there are people who are not interested or that might miss out. If you have elderly or people with disability, you can inform them, by the way, there's this and this polling station here. As citizens, we must also bring ourselves in. It's difficult. It's easy to sit back and just complain.
The social contract that you're referring to throughout certainly does include that clause.
Yes.
That I also have responsibility not only towards myself, but also towards you.
Absolutely.
And towards the country.
Absolutely.
Deployment is a matter close to your heart. And you've shared with us how in the past your observers have noted that where there is a delay, where there is a challenge, where there is a long queue at 9 o'clock, because the law requires for you to be present.
Yes.
You can't have been at home or elsewhere at a bar at 9 o'clock and then rock up at 12 and expect to still be assisted, right?
Yes.
But your team's observation has been in the past that accommodation is being made for those who are there and
Absolutely.
for those
Up to the latest one in the previous election, 2019, it was 8 o'clock. That's when next morning.
Yeah.
That's when the last observer then could go home. That's when the polling station was closed.
So talk to us about the plan this time around? How's it unfolding? Where are your observers? Are they already en route? Are they only leaving tomorrow? Have you dispatched them? And whether there's a specific focus. Of course, there would be general fundamentals to have regard to throughout, but whether there is a specific focus this time around, if at all.
Denver, should we start with that, or do you want to talk to ECN quickly?
Yeah, let's quickly deal with that, and as we get ready for ECN.
All right. So in this electoral cycle, we have 160 observers. We ideally wanted to have 300, and we wanted to send them all over the country. But it's also a budget issue because you need to train the people. They need to get their uniform. They will each get, they were all trained and they each get their manual.
You had the foresight of the Electoral Commission of Namibia. So let's quickly touch base with them, and then we can get into a bit more detail.
Please.
Because I think we're going to require a bit more time, because I want to know more about the mission of your observers. They do very important work. But the Electoral Commission of Namibia, the constitutional body responsible for these elections, are on standby with a press conference, and we now cross over to their head office here in the Namibian capital in Windhoek North to hear what is unfolding there at the ECN.
And maturing. We also wish to commend supporters of all political parties for exercising restraint and maturity, and more importantly, for adhering to the Code of Conduct for political parties and organizations, as we all witness for those who were at that event, that all political parties that are contesting these elections have signed the Code of Conduct. We further appeal to all political leaders to engage and encourage all their supporters to abide by this. That is the Code of Conduct. Parties should advise their followers not to plan or implement campaign activities after the end of the official campaign period. We must maintain what we have attained thus far. I move on to the removal of campaign materials in polling station and vicinity. At the end of the official campaign period, candidates, political parties, and their agents who hanged or positioned campaign materials within a radius of 500 meters of a polling station should attend to the removal of such materials. It is the responsibility of the owners and the agents to remove such materials. If the owners do not remove such materials, the presiding officers deployed at all polling stations, at every polling station, have been empowered by the law to ensure that no campaign material is found within the polling stations before commencement of the polling. All campaign materials must therefore be removed if we have such materials at or within the parameters as indicated. Such materials include posters, banners, and billboards. The Commission shared with all political parties and candidates the list and the locations of all polling stations in the run-up to the elections. Therefore, they must make sure that no polling stations is surrounded by any materials containing the sign of any political party. Any appeal for high turnout, I move on now to the next point. To the voters, I appeal to you to turn out in large numbers on election day, the 27th November 2024, as we all know. That is the day of the election. We await for you to put your voice in the box, as you have been preaching throughout the election phase. Polling stations, as we all know, it is also put in our polling stations. The list of polling stations will open from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. in the evening. And every effort has been made to ensure a seamless voting experience from the Commission side. Remember to carry out your voter card. Without a voter's card, you cannot exercise your democratic right, because your voter's card is the key to the 27. For citizens in remote areas, mobile stations have been deployed to ensure inclusivity and accessibility, as we have seen on the list of polling stations that the Commission has established. The Commission is therefore committed to reaching every eligible voter, no matter where they are, as per the gazetted polling stations, of which all of us can confirm that we have released that. In conclusion, as a Commission, we wish to remind everyone that democracy is a shared responsibility, from voters and political parties to the members of the media and civil society. Each of us has a role to play in ensuring free, fair, and credible elections. Let us stand up and act when the opportunity presents itself for us to contribute to the growth and consolidation of our multi-party democracy. Namibia has a proud history of peaceful elections, and I am confident that 2024 will be no different to what we have done in the past. Thank you very much for listening to me.
We will now move to the second statement before we start taking questions.
Now we move to the second part of our media briefing, so that we also update you as we are nearing the day. We would like to update you on the status of polling officials' recruitment for the conduct of the presidential and the National Assembly elections. Section 65 of the Electoral Act, number 5 of 2014, as amended, empowers the Electoral Commission of Namibia to recruit officials, including polling officers, for the administration of polling in the presidential and National Assembly elections. I would like to inform you that pursuant to that, the Commission advertised in March inviting applications from suitably qualified unemployed Namibians to work as polling officials or election officials in their respective constituencies. The advert included daily rates for training, deployment, and the polling. In response to the advert or advertisement, the Commission has received an overwhelming response of about 82,000 applications. After a thorough selection process, the Commission established the availability of the shortlisted candidates for training and assessment purposes. It was for both registration officials recruited for registration for the GRV 2024, or General Registration of Voters, and polling process. In respect of polling, because we are now dealing with polling, the Commission has commenced with a 9-day training session on the 15th to the 23rd November 2024 to prepare these officials, whereafter all trained officials were assessed to determine their readiness and eligibility. After the assessment, all qualified polling officials were to sign their contracts of employment. However, on Sunday, the 24th November, the Commission learned through the media that some of the would-be polling officials were intending to boycott the signing of the contracts in demand for any upward adjustment of their training daily rate from 150 to 300, which is 100%. Particularly, this was observed in Kavango West, whereas some requested up to 10,000 in Erongo region. The Commission noted the concern raised by the polling officials through the media and has since engaged the regional electoral officers with the views of having the demands reduced in writing. The Commission has to date received 2 formal written petitions which are currently receiving our attention. It's also worth noting that the demands by the polling officials differ from region to region, as you can see or as indicated already. While the situation is being monitored, the Commission convened on the 24th day of the November 2024 and resolved to increase the daily rate with 100 in addition to the 150 that they are already receiving for the training. In other words, to the daily training rate of 250. This is notwithstanding that the fact, notwithstanding the fact that before the conduct of the General Registration of Voters, the Commission had already resolved to increase the daily allowance from the initial advertisement rate of 436 to 476 to the days outside the polling, while the polling and counting days were increased from 610 to 710 for polling officials and presiding officers, from 523 to 563 for days outside the polling, and 749 to 824 for polling and counting days, respectively. In other words, when the officials applied, they have applied this on all the rates. When we started the GRV, they were paid on the new rates that were revised by the Commission. While in the process of attending to the concern raised, the Commission has also learned that some officials opted not to accept the contract, of which these were replaced with officials from the pool of reserves that we have, because when we trained with reserves. We wish to commend those who have signed their employment contracts for their dedication, and encourage them to remain committed to ensure that the successful conduct of elections. And I also wish to state here that as we are talking, most of the regions that were scheduled to deploy the teams have done so. Waiting for tomorrow, because the deployment is is based on 2 days for those teams that are going to far areas. They are set to be deployed today. And for those that are going, will be deployed around nearby areas or villages or even urban areas, they will be deployed tomorrow. The Commission assures all our stakeholders its readiness to conduct these elections, including our voters, the political parties, and election observers, of its readiness or highest resolve to deal with emerging issues promptly as we prepare for polling, as we did in responding to the concerns raised by the polling officials. On that, I thank you for listening to me once again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now take questions by indication of raising your hand. You introduce yourself and the media house you are representing. Let's try to be brief. Right? You're first.
Okay, my name is Nixon from the SABC in Channel Africa, in South Africa. According to the Commission, how many number of polling stations have?
Watching Election Talk here on NBC One. That was the Chief Electoral and Referenda Officer, Mr. Peter Sharma, talking to us from the ECN headquarters about Wednesday, the 27th day of November 2024. Now, a number of issues that he raised, Madam Anita. One is that, campaign time is over. In fact, we have a campaign blackout period for today and for tomorrow, and no one is to campaign anymore.
500 meters around a polling station.
Specifically, and at the same time, as far as campaign material is concerned, that is to have been removed already, but certainly that the Act empowers their officials to remove whatever it is that they encounter.
It's still all over town.
I was going to ask, you're preempting that, I was going to ask, often one sees, even for a while, some campaign material, whatever that constitutes. Well, I think one has to be sensible about it. Certainly, manpower is always a challenge. You know it, and I know it as well. To the extent to which it doesn't infringe or is not in very close proximity to a polling station, I can imagine that is what the Act is clear about, and we should be mature about it in any case. What's your observation in terms of generally the campaign blackout period, how that is important, how that is also prescribed by the Act, and the removal of the campaign material? You've already shared with us that your observation has been that we see intermittently some campaign material lingering long after the fact.
Lingering, the posters are all there up, and if you drive through town, the point of the blackout is political parties need to rest. Citizens need a break. When come 27th of November, 500 meters around the polling station, you shouldn't be influenced. You should vote out of your own conviction. You shouldn't go there last minute, oh, I saw these colors, I saw this person, I saw this logo. I mean, ideally by now we should have informed ourselves through campaign material or through manifestos and so forth. But the point is to give the campaigners a break also. Everybody need to rest so that you can let it sink in and then go, and also to just protect as well the citizens around the polling station. We saw in South Africa it's allowed. You can show up with your campaign regalia to the polling station, and it was also suggested to be introduced to Namibia. But the reason for Namibia, for us to have introduced that it shouldn't be, is to really ensure there's no undue influence.
And that's an important point to remember, so that ultimately your vote is your choice, and that choice may be kept secret. It's a secret ballot, so that's also what the legislation provides for, so that apart from the undue influence that is definitely not allowed, that you can also exercise that right freely without any form, of course, of
And you
of
need to let it sink
interference.
in. You also now need to say, okay, I've read all this, I've seen all this. Let me give myself time to reflect.
And internalize what it is that I saw and what I
Exactly.
witnessed.
Exactly.
The Chief Electoral and Referenda Officer also called on Namibians to show up in numbers. It's also what you said earlier. And again, the proof of the pudding lies in the eating. It's one thing to make these calls. It's one thing to sensitize and spread the message as far and wide as possible across the length and breadth of this republic. But it's something else for someone to, on Wednesday, choose when they wake up what it is that they're going to do with what will be a public holiday. And because it's not mandatory, it's up to them to decide whether they want to turn up in numbers or not.
We also always wonder, is it going to rain? Is that going to be an excuse?
And of course, as
Is it gonna
Namibians,
be
we
sunny?
welcome the rain,
Yes.
right? So how do you strike a balance? I've heard someone say the following this afternoon, that the success of an election is determined by the number of people who turn up on polling day. And I've been marinating on that, and I've been trying to internalize that. How fair of a statement is it? Because if we reach consensus that indeed the measurement should be that, whose sole responsibility is it? It cannot only be the responsibility of the ECN.
You know, then you must also now vote right, because we don't want spoiled ballots. That's why the ECN and the NID and other stakeholders, you can show up, but what if your cross is above that little
Box.
box?
Yeah.
What if you freeze? What if you make a mistake? Because people can show up, but there is a particular number of spoiled ballots that we also experience.
And those also need to be accounted for. But I think it's
Yeah.
important also to draw a distinction between what constitutes a spoiled ballot versus what constitutes a rejected ballot. In the event that I sneeze, for instance, something I may not have control over in that moment, that is deemed to be a spoiled ballot. And then, of course, that,
For real.
that may be replaced, right? Or if something happens, my nose starts bleeding profusely.
Of
and
course,
that,
yeah.
and that it reaches the ballot. That's a spoiled ballot, and then I'm entitled to another ballot. But in the event of a rejected ballot, someone who then draws like a beard or a moustache on a candidate for whatever reason, because that also demonstrates and depicts certain behavior and certain conduct. It's a message that's conveyed, but such a ballot is not a valid ballot, and it must be reflected as such, because in the end, these papers need to tally.
But now, honestly, do you have time for that? You stood the whole day in line, or however long in line, to go and make a message. That message could have been posted somewhere else and reach more people than for one person to count or for several persons to count.
I want to remind you of your earlier stance on what it is that is a constitutional democracy, you know.
To go into a polling station and start.
So you are
Join,
free to register to vote, because that's where it starts, and that's certainly also not compulsory. And then if you did choose to register to vote, you can show up on polling day or not, because again, it's not compulsory. And if you do show up, you can then choose to not make that paper count. I think it does, perhaps, if I'm inferring correctly, demonstrate one of the drawbacks of what constitutional democracy allows for, because I'm hearing you say that why would a Namibian go through the effort of waking up early, standing in a long queue, get to their respective ballot, and then
Spoil it.
invalidate it,
Exactly.
ultimately.
Exactly.
And why do
Isn't
you
that a
think
waste of your time?
But who are you to say it's a waste of my time when I choose to do so?
Because of the social contract. It's when you take your democracy serious and when you want to make your voice heard, then make it heard. If you want to do a comedy show or express yourself in any other way, I believe there are other platforms for that.
To explore, other avenues to explore.
Exactly.
Let's briefly return to what we spoke about before we crossed to the ECN's headquarters for that announcement. Deployment. What is it that your observers are looking for? What is it that they are on the lookout for? Why is observation of elections so critically important?
It's critically important. They need to understand what's going on at a polling station, what's going on with the eligible voters, the security forces that are there, are they allowing a conducive environment? Is the polling station conducive enough for the elderly, people with disability?
So what would they ordinarily flag if they are on the lookout for a conducive environment?
As an observer, you're neutral. You need to remain completely neutral. The only other person you can talk to is the presiding officer. If there's anything you observe that disturbs you, we have this guide, and at the end of the guide, we have 3 templates, 3 forms where you look at closing and counting, what happened during that process. We have evaluation, what happened during tallying. We have the code of conduct for election observers.
Also mentioned by the Chief Electoral and
Yes,
Referendum
there's a
Officer,
code
how
of
important it
conduct
is.
for political parties and also for observers. As observer, you need to know you're neutral. You're not there to follow your own agenda. You signed a code of conduct that you will do the duty that your mandate for, or that you signed up
And
for.
that part of that mandate is to observe whether or not
Neutrally.
a conducive environment exists.
Exactly.
So what are the issues that they would ordinarily flag in their reports?
What we've seen, most polling station, they ran well. If there were issues flagged, it was, for instance, if a polling station started too late, if it stayed up very long, if there was assisted voting, if security personnel didn't make it conducive for observers to observe.
Some of those circumstances are of such an urgent nature that they would warrant intervention.
Absolutely.
So
For
at what
instance,
stage
if
would
too
they
many-
flag that, and what would the intervention from your part ordinarily look like?
Let's say it's 9 o'clock in the evening and there are still 200 people standing there. And at some point the security personnel says, sorry,
Close the door.
We close the door. And the eligible voters are like, no, I still want to vote. We already had situation where security personnel had to fire shots in the air to warn the citizens, sorry,
remain calm.
to remain calm, we need to control the situations. So these things have happened, but most of the time, whatever happens, they just need to write it down. And if it's a gross misdemeanor or issue, they need to inform the presiding
Thank
officer,
you.
because the presiding officer is the manager of a polling station.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your wealth of expertise, and thank you for the great work that you
You're
continue
so
to do
welcome,
on
Denver.
the part
Always
of
a
the NID,
pleasure.
but also your personal contribution to this
Yes,
project.
you will
called
see
Namibians.
us on the 27th.
Appropriately clad.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And that draws to a close this special edition of Election Talk from a refurbished Studio 2 here at the NBC headquarters. The head of state, President Nangolo Mbumba, has a very special message for Namibians ahead of the presidential and national assembly elections scheduled for this Wednesday, the 27th day of November 2024. So from me, Kisting, and the entire crew, it's bye-bye.